Workhouse Lane was suffused with the gentle sound of birdsong last week. The secluded farm track deep in the Essex countryside ran with ribbons of water underfoot weeks of rain. The remains of a small bunch of flowers, brown and desecrated now on a rusty field gate, was the only clue to what was once a scene of unimaginable horror. In the first bleak sunlight of December 7th, 1995, two men were trampling through the snowy fields near the village of Rettendon on the way to feed their pheasants when they came across a dark blue Range Rover where the lane meets open fields. Its doors were closed, but its sunroof strangely open. Through the blood-splattered windscreen, they saw the slumped bodies of three men, victims of a cold and calculated massacre. Inside the car was Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe, local underworld figures. Tucker was the head of a security firm that controlled the local supply of drugs in nightclubs across Essex and South London, with a sideline in debt collecting and punishment beatings. Tate, a bodybuilder, was Tucker's enforcer. Rolfe, shortly before his death, had helped murder a small-time drug dealer who crossed the firm. Each man had been shot through the back of the head, so swiftly they had no time to react, let alone retaliate. Rolfe's hands were still on the steering wheel and his foot on the brake. Tucker was still holding his mobile phone. Tate took a bullet to the stomach to immobilise him before he too was shot in the head. Jack Worms, 39, a local motor mechanic who had served time for insurance fraud, and Mick Steele, 52, a known drug importer, was convicted of the murders in January 98 and given triple life sentences. The conviction rested on the word of a supergrass, Darren Nichols, a paid police informer, convictions for dishonesty. Nichols told the court a compelling story of being the unwitting getaway driver on the night of the killings. He said he dropped Worms off in Rettendon, then at 7 p.m. Worms called and asked to be picked up at the end of Workhouse Lane. There, Worms and Steele got into the car, dripping with blood. Nichols told hushed Old Bailey courtroom, Steele said he felt like the angel of death. Worms and Steele have always maintained their innocence. Worms' brother John has campaigned tirelessly since they were arrested, but all of a sudden he has real hope. New evidence suggests the story the men told of their whereabouts on the night of the murders is true, and that Nichols' account is a pack of lies. He allegedly confessed it to fellow Supergrasses before the trial. This man, an inmate on the Supergrass unit at Woodham Prison, where all inmates are known as blogs to protect their identity, Nichols was known as Blog 19, has come forward. His name has been passed on to the CCRC, which has the power to send the case to the Court of Appeal. Worms admits he was in Rettendon on the night of the murder, but says Nichols has asked him to fetch his broken down car from the car park of the Wheat Sheep pub. New telephone records suggest that Worms is telling the truth. Of 41 calls made by an expert using Worms' telephone along the length of Workhouse Lane, none connected to the section picked up by Worms' call on the night of the murder. A third of the calls was made from the Wheatsheaf pub car park did. The forensic engineer report says it was rather more than likely that Worms, was at the Wheatsheaf pub, then in the Workhouse Lane. Chris Bowen, the solicitor who represented the men at the trial, is so convinced their convictions will be a miscarriage of justice that he is working on their appeal without charge. Two men were convicted of a triple murder on the evidence of a man who was himself a suspect, a self-confessed liar, convicted criminal and dishonest police informer, he says. Frankly, this is scandalous. Nobody denies there were links between the men. In 1992, both Jack and John Worms went to prison for helping a friend get rid of a car so she could claim on insurance. They were sentenced to 16 months for a first offence. In Hollandsey Bay Open Prison, John struck up a friendship with cellmate Pat Tate and introduced him to Jack. After a fortnight, Tate and John were moved to another prison. Steele was also at Hollandsey Bay, as was Nichols. They all lived in the Essex-Suffolk area and kept in touch. The Rettendon killings would have caused a sensation at any time, but the shootings came less than a month after the death of Leah Betts, the policeman's daughter who collapsed after taking ecstasy tablet at her 18th birthday party. By May, 6 months after the murders, the police seemed no closer to the killers. John Williams believes it was desperation to close the case that led them to fall for Nichols' story. The idea that my brother would shoot someone is ridiculous, he says. But if he did, he would take one person and one person only with him, me. We did everything together. He'd never have gone with Steele or anyone else. I know absolutely, without question in my heart, he didn't do it. I will fight and fight till he gets out. Nichols was stopped that May, accompanying a friend who had £10,000 worth of cannabis in the boot of his car. Facing many years in jail, he began to talk. Before his 28 different statements, Williams and Steele had not been serious suspects. An intelligence report compiled in the weeks after the murder had 167 entries. Steele's name appears twice, with informants suggesting that he, as an associate of Tate, might know who carried out the killings. Jack Williams' name does not appear at all. Police investigating the murder of Jill Dando, the television presenter, say they are looking for a man with a military background, someone used to handling guns. She was a lone woman taken by surprise. Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were highly dangerous men. In his summing up, even the trial judge pointed out whoever committed the murders must have been an expert marksman. Yet Williams says that though his father and youngest brother have licensed shotguns, their family lived on a farm in Suffolk. Jack was never interested. He's a mechanic. He's interested in how things work. When we were kids, my dad bought him a clay pigeon trap. Jack was fascinated. He was pulling the arm around when it swung full circle. It hit him on the neck and knocked him out cold. He still got a scar. He never went near any guns or clay pigeons after that. The brothers spent every weekend together, parasailing off the back of a speedboat they jointly owned. I suppose people thought it was bought with drug money, says John, but my half is still being paid for on the mortgage, and Jack's was paid up for when his house was sold. Darren Nichols is in hiding. He has moved with his family and been given a new identity under the Witness Protection Programme. John Williams and Jackie Steele still hold out for a faint hope that his conscience will get the better of him. There is no doubt that some of his statements were untrue. At one time, he suggested Steele had murdered Tate because Tate had told a group of IRA men that Steele had stolen money that they'd put up for a drug run. He did not know that the IRA men were really undercover police involved in an elaborate sting. On police tapes, he says, of Williams and Steele, I wanted them out of my life. I wanted them to be set up. While serving his time in prison, Jack Williams learnt to read and write and took on woodwork courses and started doing technical drawings on computers. He had a good relationship with the prison officers, and John says that him and his brother were so alike that when he went to visit him recently, one joked that Jack could have slipped out the back door, they'd keep John till he came back. Jack said, no way, when I leave here, I'm going the right way, out the front door. And that is exactly what happened to Jack Williams earlier this year in 2021.